What better time to be excited for Ret Paladin than in midnight, grabbing the light to fight the darkness with an above average Paladin cinematic. A lot has changed for Red in this alpha build we tested, and I will go over all of the talents, spells and builds you can tweak and expect. The concept of Ret Paladin remains the same, since the core philosophy of the class design seems to revolve around approachability and intuitiveness. That has been translated into the talent changes, some minor spell changes and pruning, and likely will further be iterated once we have some cool builds to get into, on top of the hero talents getting a small facelift as well. You still build Holy Power with Ret, yet now Crusading Strikes is gone, and you can further replace Crusader Strike with Templar Strikes, as you would have done before were it not for the efficiency of having all of this passive and baked into your auto attacks. You don't have to play with Templar Strikes, but you should. This gives your basic generator a 2-charge spell that keeps it engaging. Of course, you still have Blade of Justice and Judgment, which, by the way, now gets replaced with Hammer of Wrath during your wings, so that button is gone. To be fair, this is a good change, albeit hilarious when you think the amount of pruning this spec already undergone even before alpha. But the relationship it had with your rotation hardly ever saw you press it. Your two main spenders remain Templar Verdict and Divine Storm. Templar's Verdict will more than likely be upgraded to Final Verdict through the talents, getting a 20-yard range to it, deal more damage, more than twice actually, and have a 15% chance to reset the cooldown of your Judgment. Speaking of, Avenging Wrath will reset your Judgment as well, or at least the functionality now will. Replacing Judgment with Hammer of Wrath seems to make it immediately available, upgrading its damage considerably on top of the other bonuses you get from Avenging Wrath. Don't get too comfortable with pressing this button, since it's likely not going to live long on your bars. You have 2 more offensive cooldowns, in case you haven't played Red in a while. Divine Toll is in your class tree, and all Paladin specs have access to it. It shoots out Judgment on up to 5 targets, which seems to not be changed to Hammer of Wraths if your wings are available, ending up as a good source of Holy Power, AoE damage, and the Judgment debuff that increases the damage enemies take from your big spenders. Your other main offensive is Wake of Ashes, now one of the most iconic Ret Paladin abilities. You swing your big sword in a cone and deal massive damage on top of generating 3 Holy Power. This is already pretty cool, but here comes the capstone that has never not been taken ever since it was introduced, with Radiant Glory. This talent makes it so Wake of Ashes will also proc your Avenging Wrath for a shorter duration, however, 12 seconds instead of 24 if you take some other talents. This bakes everything you have in the 30-second cooldown Wake of Ashes has, if it weren't for me lying to you a minute ago. You have yet another offensive cooldown with the new Execution Sentence, which, in my defense, you can just not pick it, but the way that the talent setup is now doesn't look like that's gonna happen. Maybe Wake of Ashes and Avenging Wrath being combined into one ability isn't such a bad idea with all of these cooldowns being available. And the devs definitely took this to heart when they remade Execution Sentence to also have the effect of Final Reckoning, which is now gone, or rather baked yet into this ability. Honestly, the damage accumulation of Execution Sentence has been nerfed so much over the years that having a more amplified effect feels nice and less forgettable. With it comes a new capstone in Judge, Jury, and Executioner, reworked from what you may know in the past. It buffs your spenders by 5%, but more importantly, makes the first 2 of them free after you cast Execution Sentence, giving you immediate access to your strongest funnel abilities to exploit the damage accumulation effect of your cooldown, now on a 1-minute timer. This can create some potentially nice builds if the tuning isn't one-sided and forcing you to use a cookie-cutter build like we've been having for in the past few years. More on that in a minute. Lastly, this expansion we get Apex Talents, a set of 3 talent nodes that further empower or deep dive down a particular aspect of your specialization. In Red's case, Art of War or Righteous Cause, whichever one you end up picking. It makes your Blade of Justice resets hit with 150% increased damage. You also get a 20% damage increase on your spenders during Avenging Wrath, which will also give you a free reset of Blade of Justice with the bonus mentioned. This might become problematic once we start playing a few more talents, which I suspect will become part of your core build. Before I tell you of the playstyle, we want to thank our patrons for sponsoring this video and all class rework videos we are about to do. It helps the team quite a bit to have your support, and you are making a lot of this happen. This isn't going unrewarded, of course, because our Patreons have access to custom-made wallpapers, monthly bloopers, and more in case you wanted to be a part of the gang and help us make more videos in the future. Patreon.com/Marcelian&Flame if you want to support your boys and gal to bring you every spec coverage in Midnight Alpha. The playstyle for Ret remained mostly the same by and large, and with one large problem. Your moment-to-moment gameplay sees you build Holy Power with, ideally, Blade of Justice to facilitate the new empowered procs, Judgment and Templar Strikes to add to this. You will get free procs of spenders from various sources, whether it is the Divine Purpose talent in your class tree, Imperium Power in your spec tree, or a bunch more when you press your cooldowns, so the flow is quite nice. You will use Wake of Ashes every 30 seconds for a big burst of damage and 3 additional Holy Power, and even Avenging Wrath if you play the Capstone, which changes everything. This is important to mention because Avenging Wrath has a few more things you need to know. If you play Herald of the Sun, it will also give you another Divine Purpose for a free spender, even generating 2 free Holy Power after enabling it. This means that if you play Radiant Glory, your Wake of Ashes will generate 5 Holy Power. Assuming you don't want to waste any, you will likely start combat with 0 Holy Power and every 30 seconds after that as well. Seeing as how your spenders consume 3, but you can hold 5, and you have different amounts generated by different abilities across combat, it can feel a bit wasteful to either cast Wake of Ashes with some Holy Power getting munched, or holding Wake of Ashes until you can empty your Holy Power, likely ending up in more damage loss overall, because this might end up happening quite often over the course of combat as your cooldowns become available. The big problem I mentioned was the Judge, Jury, and Executioner upgrade for Execution Sentence that keeps 2 spenders free after you use the respective ability, after which you will cast your Wake of Ashes generating 5 Holy Power if you're playing Herald of the Sun and the Radiant Glory Capstone. It will also give you a Blade of Justice reset and upgrade Judgment to Hammer of Wrath for the extra damage. Because 2 spenders are free and you still haven't casted Divine Toll, another 1-minute offensive cooldown that generates Holy Power that you want to cast as quickly as possible, you end up with a difficult choice. Spend the free Holy Power on your big hitters, then at least 1 to 2 more to deplete Holy Power, and then use your Divine Toll, the Blade of Justice reset from the Apex talents, and more Hammer of Wraths, or cast them right away for their bonus damage, completely ignoring your Holy Power mechanic. Obviously, you won't want to do the latter, so you will hold on to these procs and Divine Toll for a bit, which often than not has happened for me to be well past when Avenging Wrath has concluded, making me not have the time to cast any Hammer of Wraths or Divine Toll during its damage increase window. The Templar Hero Talent doesn't have the Holy Power economy issue as bad as Herald, and granted, these seem to happen only in AoE and if you are using specific builds, which you don't have to. But then we run into an issue where talents and builds work against each other, or at least aren't fully satisfying because you are not making full use of either your new Hammer of Wrath upgrade, your Apex talent, your free spenders procs, or the new Capstone. Could be an oversight, which will likely be fixed as the alpha goes on, and when that happens, Red actually has a really crazy fun rotation that definitely surprised me. As for the hero talents themselves, not much changed. Herald still seems to be a source of a lot of procs and Holy Power generation, on top of the passive damage from downlights. Templar had a slight change where casting Divine Toll will now also cast Divine Hammer, which is currently gone from the spec tree. The Capstone Light's Deliverance seems to be bugged and doesn't offer the free Hammer of Light at the moment. The core of the talents haven't changed for Ret, so any type of builds will likely see variants more on the bottom part of the talent tree rather than the rest. This build could be the closest approximation with what you might have gotten used to while playing on live servers by taking Radiant Glory and all of the single target talents, which surprisingly are fewer than AoE ones. Because of the Apex talents and all of the benefits of Avenging Wrath, it sounds like Radiant Glory is what you want to trigger an extra empowered Art of War per minute, but it does feel like it's flooding me with holy power more than I can actually spend. This other build, however, seemed way better and a bit more reminiscent of the older Ret playstyle. The advantage of having Crusade as a capstone is you actually have a choice, which now seems between it and Radiant Glory, but Judge, Jury, Executioner can also be a part of this mix. Another advantage of not playing Radiant Glory is that you can pop your wings before Execution Sentence, since the blast of damage it does is quite high, and having that buffed with wings can be quite amazing. With Radiant Glory, you would have to use Wake of Ashes first and then Execution Sentence for the same effect to occur, losing out on the Wake of Ashes damage to fuel Execution Sentence own little damage accumulation. Assuming all of this should work intuitively and there isn't some math crunching behind the scenes that will make it fine to munch a big damage source in favor of another big damage source for a super small marginal game, a gameplay the devs seem to want to stray away from since it opens up the go look up a guide to know why you are playing wrong discussion once again, this might have some problems. Any of the changes I mentioned don't seem to be relevant to any raids or dungeon scenarios, since the only talent I feel confident in switching for pure AoE content would be Jurisdiction being replaced with Tempest of the Lightbringer, which I'm pretty sure is the exact same change you make currently on live servers. Actually, on live, you have way more talent nodes purely in the tree that open up more options. 6 more nodes to be precise, so we might still be looking at an undercooked Ret Paladin. All in all, a general feedback after playing it on the alpha is that I was surprised at how a lot of the unintuitive talents have been shaved up, and it actually feels like a new player can look at the talents and pick what they like without making almost any wrong choice. Granted, having 6 fewer nodes makes that extremely more accessible and easy. The spec feels better at max level, which I was able to test in some enclosed environments, and I think it will only really feel complete if you stack haste, which could arguably be another problem in its design if you need max level and good gear for it to feel good. The amount of resources you can float even on Templar is way too high for how slow you can spend them. We will have more videos on Ret as it gets more updates, so stay tuned on our channel. Meanwhile, feast your eyes on the new Unholy rework, which we have dubbed the richest in fantasy and flavor, an actual rework that players have been asking for.